Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to look straight under the hood of your own mind. We're exploring those hidden psychological roadblocks that are actively holding you back, and, more importantly, we'll contrast them with the silent, highly effective cognitive habits of the top 1%. Listen, if you've ever felt like you're putting in this intense effort, grinding day after day, but you just aren't moving forward the way you expect to, well, this is exactly where you need to be.
So let's just dive right into it. Why are you really stuck? You know, when progress stalls, most of us are incredibly quick to point the finger outwards. It's a totally natural defense mechanism. We blame a lack of opportunity, we blame bad luck, the economy, or maybe just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We tell ourselves this incredibly convincing story that external factors are entirely to blame for our plateau. But psychology points us toward a much more uncomfortable, yet ultimately liberating truth.
And here is that hard truth. It's not your circumstances, it's your thinking patterns. The reality is, a person can have all the elite degrees, all the impressive qualifications, the absolute cutting-edge information in the world, and they will still fail if they operate with low-level cognitive habits. These habits act literally like invisible anchors. They quietly run in the background, rewiring your brain to stay stagnant. They drain your energy and shape your entire personality without you even consciously realizing it's happening. You absolutely cannot outwork a toxic mental loop. If you truly want to move forward and unlock that top-tier potential, you've got to find and subtract those anchors.
Section 1. The ego traps, blame and certainty. Let's examine two toxic patterns that are essentially massive failures of self-reflection. The first trap we fall into is chronic blame shifting. If nothing is ever your fault, if it's always your boss who doesn't get you, your parents who raised you wrong, society, the system, you're showing a severe lack of what psychologists call metacognition. Metacognition is basically just the ability to analyze your own thinking. It's stepping back and observing how your mind works. By constantly blaming external forces for your setbacks, you are literally outsourcing your power to things you completely cannot control. Intelligent minds, they operate fundamentally differently. They look directly at a failure, take the hit to their ego, and ask, okay, that's on me. What was my role here? Because they know you cannot fix a problem that you refuse to even acknowledge. Self-reflection is absolute power. It's exactly why we say that changing your opinion is intelligence in action. You know, in our society, a lot of people mistakenly treat changing their mind as a sign of weakness, like you lack conviction or something. They think it makes them look inconsistent. But actually, scratch that. Adjusting your worldview when you're presented with new data is the very definition of a highly functioning intellect. It means your ego is secondary to your pursuit of the truth.
But when you flatly refuse to change your mind, you fall into what psychology calls cognitive rigidity. This is our second ego trap. If you find yourself speaking on incredibly complex topics with total, unshakable confidence, despite actually having a pretty limited understanding of them, you are falling for the overconfidence bias. And this bias is dangerous because it creates a false illusion of clarity. Nuance is scary, right? So the brain just prefers the comfort of absolute certainty. But when you reject new methods just because they're different from what you already know, your thinking turns into a closed loop. And let's be totally clear here, a closed loop completely and permanently blocks all growth.
Section 2. The Overthinking Paradox, Trapped in Loops. Let's explore the fascinating contradiction of how high intelligence can sometimes become the exact thing that traps us. We've got a really clear contrast between two very different types of thinking here. On one hand, we have analysis paralysis. This is toxic overthinking. This happens when your mind just refuses to shut off. You replay every single possibility, every potential disaster, until making a decision actually becomes harder, not easier. You kind of feel like you're being productive because, hey, you're thinking hard, but really, you're just trapped in the fear of, what if I choose wrong? It's an endless, exhausting loop. But on the flip side, we see a defining habit of the top 1%, strategic overthinking. High intelligence absolutely involves thinking in deep layers, but elite performers use this cognitive power to simulate outcomes 10 moves ahead. The crucial difference is that the top 1% know precisely when to stop the simulation and start taking action. Real intelligence explores all the branches for sure, but eventually it simplifies the complex into a single, actionable step.
Section 3. Illusions of control, magic, and perfection. Let's shift gears and look at how our brains frantically try to manufacture a sense of safety and motivation in highly maladaptive ways.
Psychology calls this first illusion magical thinking. It's a pattern where the brain confuses coincidence with cause. I mean, we've all been there, right? Maybe you have a specific pair of lucky socks you have to wear for a big presentation, or you assume a certain color brings you wealth. It feels harmless, kind of fun even. But when you start living your life like luck is in total control, you're outsourcing logic to superstition. You completely stop looking for actual evidence and start building arbitrary rituals out of thin air just to feel safe. This is incredibly detrimental because it prevents you from solving real problems. Your brain is basically taking a lazy, comforting shortcut to a dramatic story, rather than doing the hard, necessary work to find a factual solution.
Another major illusion of control is maladaptive perfectionism. A lot of us falsely believe that being relentlessly hard on ourselves is the only way to stay motivated and succeed. We disguise our severe self-criticism as ambition. We call it having high standards, but guys, this is purely toxic. It's the punishing belief that anything less than absolutely perfect is a total failure. And the science unequivocally backs up how harmful this is. Studies out of Stanford show that constant self-criticism actually increases your cortisol levels. That's your body's primary stress hormone. And when cortisol spikes chronically, it literally lowers the brain's physical ability to learn from mistakes. You have to understand this. You cannot sustainably grow from a place of self-hate.
The fix for this perfectionism trap relies on a remarkably simple shift. Notice what happens when your internal narrative is a constant drumbeat of, "I'm not enough." Your body initiates a full-blown stress response. Cortisol spikes, panic sets in, and your biological ability to learn is just entirely blocked. But look what happens when you change that. If you simply rewrite that internal narrative in the moment to, "I'm learning," you bypass the panic entirely and activate your subconscious reward system. This massively reduces your stress and actively promotes cognitive growth. It's an incredibly small linguistic shift, but man, it carries massive biological consequences for your success.
Section 4. The validation drain, seeking approval. We're moving to our final toxic pattern now, focusing on how our daily interactions secretly drain our cognitive reserves dry.
We are talking about social validation dependency. This is the deeply toxic need to be completely understood, liked, or approved of by others before you can finally feel at peace with your own decisions. And what this inevitably leads to is the incredibly exhausting habit of constantly over-explaining yourself. Did you know that every single time you over-explain a choice you've made, your brain releases stress hormones? It does this because it's triggering a primal survival instinct, this deep-seated fear of being rejected and cast out of the tribe. But real, unshakable power begins the exact moment you realize you do not owe everyone a reason for your growth. Once you stop relentlessly performing just to be understood by people who aren't even on your path, you finally gain access to your own unvarnished authenticity.
Standard advice tells you to obsessively manage your time. But the top 1%, they operate on a completely different metric. They rigorously manage their energy. Think about it. You can have all the time in the world, but if your mind is exhausted, that time is totally useless. Genius isn't about simply working more hours until you drop. It's about fiercely protecting your cognitive peaks. When you decisively cut out the energy drains we've been talking about, like over-explaining yourself, seeking constant validation, or looping in analysis paralysis, you preserve the vital mental fuel required for that high-level strategic overthinking. Elite performers don't just protect their calendars, they are fiercely protective of their cognitive energy.
Section 5. Cognitive space, reclaiming your mind. As we bring this explainer to a close, we really need to talk about what actually happens when you start doing the difficult work of subtracting these mental loops.
The brain mistakes familiar pain for safety. Removing these deeply ingrained toxic patterns, it's not going to be a walk in the park. At first, your brain is absolutely going to resist you. It naturally prefers the familiar pain of chronic blame or the familiar exhaustion of perfectionism, because those feelings are predictable. And to a primitive part of your brain, predictability feels like survival. It feels safe. But I promise you, if you push through that initial discomfort, as the loud noise of these toxic habits begins to finally fade, your mind will naturally rebalance. True cognitive space will finally open up. You'll transition away from a life of simply reacting defensively to your environment to a life where you are actively processing reality, making strategic choices, and confidently directing your own path.
Your mind is, without a doubt, your greatest tool. But that is only true if you are the one sitting in the driver's seat. So I'm going to leave you with this question to reflect on. Which of these thinking patterns have you caught yourself repeating? Is it the chronic blame shifting, the exhausting analysis paralysis, or maybe the relentless over-explaining? Drop the number of the pattern in the comments below. Let's see how many of us are actively doing the work to rewire our minds today. And hey, make sure to hit that subscribe button to join a community dedicated to the raw truth of psychology and unlocking our ultimate potential. See you next time.